So on to this morning's agenda. So I'll be presenting, first of all, just an overview of what's happened since we last talked to you about the local skills report and plan. And then we'll be moving on to our main sort of area this morning for discussion and action, which is around transition support and helping young people realise their destinations. And that will be presented by Elaine North and Luke Mattam from our OCC Employment Education Training team, and Nikki Wakefield from our OXLEP Careers and Enterprise Company team, our hub lead, will be supporting on that. And then we'll be hearing from Sally Williams. So you'll recall from the last meeting that we asked for members to work together in a working group, and Sally will be reporting back on that for us. Then we've got some information around the T-levels and the developments within T-levels from Fiona Aldridge at the Learning and Work Institute. And then Matt Reynolds from Cirencester College will be telling us what it's been like to pilot those T-levels. So hopefully you'll find that really useful information as the skills landscape changes. And then finally, we just finish off with a discussion, hopefully, and some ideas from yourselves around what you'd like to see on the agenda for the future meetings. I think we've still got a few people just entering, so welcome if you're just entering. And we're going to move on now to agenda item 2, which is around the local skills report and plan. So really just an update for you. We went through a while ago all of the information, the sort of details that were included in the local skills report and plan. And that was a plan which was commissioned by the Department for Education through the Skills Advisory Panel. So we have been working on that, and that has now been published and is online. It was published in May. There's lots and lots of information in there about skills needs, skills supply in Oxfordshire, any skills gaps, priorities for the future, and also how we would like to work together with stakeholders and partners to bridge some of those gaps. So that's available online. When you receive the slide back from Mel, this link that says local skills report and plan in the teal colour will take you directly to that report. There's also a huge annex of data that comes with it and information, including the core indicators that the Department for Education asked us to deliver on, and also lots of other additional information, local information that helps support that report. So do take a look at that when you get a chance. So moving on from the local skills report and plan, we were hoping that the future meetings might include us discussing how we deliver on some of the priorities in the plan. However, things have changed slightly in that the Skills for Jobs white paper, which was published in January this year, set out the government's blueprint for reshaping the technical skills system to better support the needs of local labour market and the wider economy. So to begin the process of transforming the delivery of technical education so that it both meets and drives demand for skills. So employers and providers must work closely together on what they've called a DFE skills accelerator. So employers and providers need to work together with the Careers and Enterprise Company, including the local Careers Hub, which at the moment we hold the contract for at OXLEP, the National Careers Service and Job Centre Plus, both to ensure that local priorities are fed into the provision of careers information, advice and guidance, and so that it's employer-led, it's integrated, and it raises awareness and interest in the opportunities that our new approach to local skills delivery will open up. I've jumped on an extra slide, and let me just go back. So what's meant to happen is that we're going to have some local skills improvement plans, and a call for Trailblazers was put out by government, and there will be for an initial period of 3 years. It's a £4 million programme, and funding is available to support the delivery of local skills improvement plan Trailblazers in 2021 to 2022. Eligible costs are around supporting engagement of other local key stakeholders, including local enterprise partnerships, mayoral combined authorities and their skills advisory panels. So LEPs were unfortunately unable to apply for this as we were not considered a business representative body at this time. So what's happened in our area is that we have been working in sort of collaboration, really. We've been consulted by the Thames Valley Chamber of Commerce, who have put in a Trailblazer bid. So that's working with Berkshire, Buckingham and Oxfordshire and Swindon, and it's around something they've called the Green Valley. So the skills required for a green industrial revolution. So new green skills can range from very technical and job specific skills to softer ones such as responsible use of resources, operational ones which can be relevant across occupations, levels of hierarchy and sectors. And the skills will need to align with the requirements of local enterprise partnerships that have identified the priorities and future growth sectors through the local skills report and plan and things like the local industrial strategy. So alongside the Trailblazers, they also called for some applications for the Strategic Development Fund, and they're looking for 12 to 16 areas to pilot the fund. The Strategic Development Fund pilot will run in a number of areas of the country, including areas that don't have a local skills improvement plan Trailblazer. But in Trailblazer areas, the Strategic Development Fund will run in tandem with the development of a local skills improvement plan Trailblazer. So collaborations of colleges were expected to form around a local economic labour market area that reflects a critical mass of employers, with sufficient providers involved in the collaboration to enable the delivery of an effective response. So Activate Learning have led on this in our area. So that's just to give you an update. As I said, we were not able as a LEP to apply for this, and we have been consulted. They didn't have to consult us, although they did have to consult mayoral combined authorities. So at the moment, that's really all the information that we can provide to you, but we are being updated as things develop. So if our application is accepted or declined, we will of course let you know, and whatever opportunities arise for this group to work together in collaboration on those Trailblazers, we will be coming back to the group as things develop. So just a quick moment for any questions. I'll do my best to answer any. As I say, we weren't required to be consulted on the programme. We have had some consultation, but I have very limited information at the moment.
There's a question from Mark Neal. I don't know if you wanted to ask it, Mark.
Yeah, sure. I was just trying to understand who is funding these Trailblazers and whether the application process was still open.
So it's funded by the Department for Education, Mark, and unfortunately the Trailblazer date has closed. It was a very short time period and wasn't hugely open to smaller providers, as I'm aware, particularly around the Strategic Development Fund, which is why larger organisations such as Activate Learning have been able to go for the Development Fund. And as I was saying, for the Trailblazer, we weren't considered an employer representative body. You had to be an employer representative body with a good body of membership of local employers to apply for the Trailblazer, which is why the Chamber of Commerce, and it was recommended in the skills paper that and the Trailblazer call that Chamber of Commerce were probably best at leading those. Does that help, Mark?
Yep, fine, thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions on that before we move on the agenda? No, I think that's a no, Mel, is that right?
Yeah, no more questions.
Okay, great, thank you. So moving on to our sort of main discussion point this morning, we've got Elaine North and Luke Matton joining us. I'm delighted that they've been able to join us and talk to you today about supporting transition around those at risk of not being in employment, education and training, and what we can do together as a collaborative group to support that team and the young people that have been particularly affected this year, with numbers in NEETs growing. Nikki Wakefield will also be supporting from our OXLEP Careers and Enterprise Company, our hub lead. She'll be providing some information on how we at OXLEP, through the Careers and Enterprise Company team, are supporting the OCC. We'll call them from now on the EAT team. So over to you, Elaine. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, good morning, everyone. So my name's Elaine North. I'm the Education Employment Training Manager for Oxfordshire, and I'm here with my colleague Luke Matton, who oversees the tracking team. So I hate to sound like someone from the government. Can I have the next slide on, please? Thanks. So a very brief outline about who we are and what we do. So it's a service that supports any young person from the age of 16 to 18 who is NEET or at risk of NEET. So our statutory duty kicks in around about September time of when someone has left school. For the past 2 years, due to the pandemic, we've actually stepped in earlier and offered to pick up casework support from the age of sort of when they're in their final few months of year 11. But we also track young people from the age of 16 to 18, and we start sort of recognising young people who might be at risk of NEET earlier in their school years. But Luke can tell you a bit more about that when we get onto his slide. Our support also goes up to anyone up to the age of 19 who's considered one of our vulnerable groups. So that's someone like a young carer, someone from our looked after team, involved with the Youth Justice Service, has an EHCP, or a teen parent. And then that support also goes up to the age of 25 if that young person has a valid current EHCP, or again is part of children we care for. Can we have the next slide, please? So there's a little bit of an overview about what we do. We report into the Department of Education. It's a statutory duty of all local authorities to offer support to anyone between the age of 16 to 18 who's looking for support around education, employment and training. The casework team, they have a large caseload of up to 25 young people they work with at any one time to support them into education, employment and training. And we also will oversee TAFs. We write early help assessments. So it's quite a bit broader than just EAT, because normally if someone's NEET around about the age of 17, there's a lot more going on. So it's a very holistic approach that we have to working with those young people. And we've got really good links with all our agencies, local partners, and obviously those teams within OCC, such as statutory service, youth justice, young carers, virtual school, etc. So that kind of gives you an overview of the young people that we support and when we get involved with them. Can I have the next slide, please? Yeah, so it's around about helping people to achieve what their destination is for year 12. And I'll talk about later on, but we have had a number of referrals this year that's a little bit different to last year, around someone fulfilling their destination. And that's probably the point of this meeting, is just to highlight to you what we're seeing with our year 11 leavers this year. But some of the support that we can offer, so you know, I mean, it's real one-to-one. We'll go to the home, we'll accompany them to an interview, we'll refer on to other agencies, we'll look for financial support if it's necessary. And in a lot of cases, we also do work with the extended family by referring them on to other agencies if it's necessary. We work with schools, colleges, all our training providers, Warnford, Highfield, CAMS. Lots of people referring to us. Basically, if someone is NEET between the age of 16 to 18, we need to know, and we will offer support. If someone wants casework, we do need consent. But up until the age of 18, we do have a statutory duty to offer support. So you can always tell us when someone is NEET, and we can take it from there. We track young people every 30 days, but it's not just tracking, we offer support. We also offer, we used to have a drop-in service where someone could come in to see us face to face, and that was throughout Oxfordshire. Due to COVID, we've had to move it to online. So we have a website. The details will be in the slides, www.oxme.info. And that web chat service is available every day. And between the hours of 1 and 3, to Monday to Thursday, we actually have an EAT caseworker manning the phone or the Oxme web chat who can speak to someone directly and offer support and guidance around their next steps. Can we have the next slide, please? An overview of who we work with. A reminder that between the ages of 16, there is the raising the participation age, which is one of the duties that we have to try and adhere to. And that's encouraging young people to stay in education and training. And as you can see, there's the type of organisations that we work with. Young people can refer themselves indirectly. Their parents very often refer them indirectly. So that's the kind of organisations that we work with. Can I have a look at the next slide, please? So this is about our intended destinations. Let me just see what slide I'm on, so I don't talk over Luke's part. So I'm going to hand this bit over to Luke, because this is Luke's slide, who can tell you about our intended destinations, how we gather that information and what we do with that information. Thanks, Luke.
Thanks, Elaine. So intended destinations, we get the data from school, and it's looking at where that young person is hoping to go the following September. So we get it for all year 11s. It doesn't necessarily mean that they have a place in college or an apprenticeship, but it's what they'd like to go into. So it gives us some sort of indication of what their plan is. Looking at the last few years, so 2019, 91% of young people had an intended destination to remain in learning. In 2020, there were a lot of blanks returned from schools. Obviously, it was a tricky year. They send intended destinations in around May, so the whole interruption wouldn't have helped at all, and we got a much lower intended destination rate. We're back up to a similar, not 2019 level, so 90% of young people have some positive intended destination for next September. And just to say, yeah, we have nearly 6,500 young people in each year group that we support. Can I have the next slide, please? So following on from the intended destination, there's something called the offer of learning. It's also known as the September guarantee. So this is a duty where all young people who are leaving year 11 or leaving year 12 should have a place in learning for the following September. So this follows the intended destinations, but it's looking at actual offers. So we get data from schools, colleges, apprenticeship lists. If a young person turns up on there to say, yes, they have a place in learning, they count as having an offer of learning. So they don't necessarily have to take up the offer, but they have to have been made an offer. We usually get around 96% of young people with offers in Oxfordshire. Last year it was lower than it normally is, but that's just how that year was. Yeah, offers of learning. Can I have the next slide, please? Elaine, do you want to cover this?
So we thought we'd sort of give an indication of how the formal offer is achieved, and literally going back to young people when they're in school. So they have quite a variety of support around their careers guidance, and anyone that knows schools and their careers guidance, they have something that they work to, which is called the Gatsby benchmarks, which is in relation to different milestones that should be achieved throughout careers guidance. Without a doubt, last year, I think everyone knows what happened last year. People were kind of thrown slightly, but our schools did react as best they could with some really creative ways to carry on with that careers guidance. But in normal pre-pandemic years, you'd have work experience, careers evenings, careers fairs, careers guidance interviews, tours of colleges, etc. Also go into employers' evenings. talk to some employers, apprenticeships, and much more. And last year, you know, schools had to really react to how things were with COVID, etc., and put together a different type of programme. This year has been better. We've certainly seen a lot more virtual opportunities being created within schools, and schools have really kept in touch with their young people over the past year 11, and that's why I think we're seeing better, obviously, destination data. But without a doubt, last year, I think someone described it as the rug was pulled from underneath them, and it's true. So, you know, it's quite a difficult year for everyone. Can I have the next slide, please? So applications for year 12s, as Luke was describing, around September guarantees, etc. It starts early on in year 11 with schools encouraging young people to make applications, etc. The intended destination guarantee data received is indicative. It doesn't count them as a fulfilled destination until we see the starter data, which is in September, October. So it's kind of like a cross-reference. We get all this intended destination information, and then we get the registers around about September, October, so we can cross-reference and see who's actually started, who's fulfilled their destination. A formal offer is achieved with good support and careers guidance, timely applications that are appropriate and attainable. And again, I'll talk a little bit more about that when we go on to what our concerns are this year. May I have the next slide, please? So I want to put just a caveat here and just say, the young people that we're working with over the past 2 years have got amazing resilience, without a doubt. I mean, what they've had to endure, schools closing, being in bubbles, being sent home. I remember at one point recording the amount of schools that having to send people home because of COVID outbreaks, etc. So young people going in, being sent home, that whole blend of online learning, on-site learning, it just changed from week to week. So how is a formal offer not achieved? So a young person not engaging in careers guidance and support offered. I think last year we saw a lot of young people who, when lockdown kicked in, kind of thought, school's over, and didn't actually respond to emails or calls from their school. Applications not made. It might sound simplistic, but actually some young people completed their application online, didn't submit the button, leaving it too late to apply. Unattainable year 12 expectations. That's when young people are not probably being realistic about what their grades might be, and maybe applying for the wrong course or the level of course that's not appropriate. In some cases, applying to go to a college that might be quite far away, and actually travelling there was not possible. Not researching the pathway to be followed. As I said, not responding to correspondence and emails. A lot of young people, they had some responses go into their spam mail and hadn't been checking it. And something as simple as that was actually causing people not to respond to their offers. No contingency plan. And I think over the past 2 years, that's the one thing we say to young people at the moment. We always used to say, have a plan B. It's more important now to have a contingency plan in place. May I have the next slide, please? So what are our concerns this year? And again, I'm not going to be negative, because we've actually got a lot of young people who have really adapted to this way of learning and have forged through and have got some options for their year 12. But what we are seeing this year are schools referring in young people, year 11 young people, who have a destination, but they don't think they're going to fulfil it. And they think that's because students feel their options have narrowed due to the pandemic. There's a real anxiety around apprenticeships. Confidence in apprenticeships have dipped, even though the opportunities are rising. Potentially competing with graduates for apprenticeship places when they've not even had work experience. And I know there's someone in the group today, I won't mention his name, but I had a really good conversation with him last week, who actually mentioned that there've been some interviews going on, and it was quite clear the young people that had some work experience compared to those that haven't. And let's remember, our year 11s that are leaving this year, the last time things were normal for them, they were in year 10. So it's a massive step change we're expecting of them to actually go into year 12, having missed some of their normal education. It's all been quite changeable for them. reflecting last year, there was overestimation of GCSE grades and levels. And if you remember last year, there was some confusion around how GCSEs would be graded. There was the algorithm, and then it went to an assessment. And I think some young people thought, I think I'm going to get this grade, and went maybe for the wrong level course and started, and within a few weeks realised it wasn't for them. Can I have the next slide, please? So I just want to reflect on that. Are our Year 11 leavers prepared for their transition to Year 12? Do our Year 11s have a contingency plan? If they don't, and over the summer things aren't going to plan, will they seek out support? And I'd reflect on last year when a lot of them didn't go back to school, and they had the opportunity to, because although school finishes on the last Friday of June, the careers guidance people that we were speaking to at school were happy to support with anything else. We've seen an increase in young people being involved in the youth justice and linked to exploitation. That kind of can possibly reduce their read options. So there are a number of providers, etc., that have a risk assessment, and if someone's got quite a heavy youth justice record about them, they may not pass that risk assessment, and we need to bear that one in mind. So anyone involved in that is reducing their options. And again, not following up on communication from colleges, schools and training providers, which is really key, because colleges and schools have been in contact over the summer, but I think young people just see the email there and don't actually respond. Can I have the next slide, please? I think everyone knows that we are seeing a very high percentage of young people with mental health issues. I think the word that we hear a lot is anxiety. There's a massive waiting list for CAMHS, and I think maybe sometimes it's been underestimated how young people have reacted to this. They are resilient, but they've also got a lot of anxieties about COVID. This year's Year 11s have had 18 months of disrupted education, missed out on milestones such as work experience and even having weekend jobs. And that was a careers guidance teacher was saying to me, actually, these young people have missed out on the weekend jobs, the evening jobs that you would normally have had. So those kind of soft skills that maybe we take for granted, they've kind of missed out on. Lack of routine and poor sleep patterns. One of the biggest areas we've come across, the parents saying they're up all night gaming. They kind of slipped into this poor routine of sleep patterns, and we are battling against that with some of our young people. And this is what quite key. We have situations where parents and carers' anxiety around COVID is so extreme, they've actually prevented their young person leaving the house or not having friends over. So we've got to remember there's extended family here who might have someone in the house who's got their own health issues, who have older people. So we've got cross-generational families with grandparents living there, and there's a real concern that if someone goes out, they might bring COVID back. Next slide, please. So now we're going to go into a breakout room. We've got 3 questions that we're going to raise. It would be really interesting to hear your feedback, what you're seeing and what you're hearing. Based on some of the information I've given here and your own thoughts, it'd be really interesting to hear how you feel we could support. Sadly, I wrote my own answers yesterday, and I'm hoping that some of yours will match up to the answers that I've got. And then it'd also be interesting to know, what do you need from us that we can support with? And, there's information that you can pass on to us so we can help young people who are at risk of need. Thank you. Over to you, Mel.
We've got a little bit before we do the breakout rooms. We've just got a little bit from Nikki. I think sure. Nikki Wakefield's just going to fill us in on the careers hub.
Great. OK, thank you. Have you got my slides, or are they there? Or perfect. Perfect. Thanks, Mel. So hi, everyone. Yes, I'm Nikki Wakefield. I work within OXLEP Skills and Careers Hub lead, which basically means we have relationships with 50 schools across 50 secondary schools and colleges across Oxfordshire. Of those 50 schools, 8 are SEND and 1 is a pupil referral unit. And we work very closely with those schools around their careers provision. Do you want to go on to the next slide? Thank you. So absolutely, as Elena said, and I'll concur with everything she said, that we're seeing and we're hearing from our schools. Young people are facing real uncertainty, but we mustn't forget there is real opportunity out there as well for them. And it's how we really get that opportunity across to them, and they recognise that. Our role through careers is really about supporting young people finding their next step. So whilst they're at school, that is their opportunity. The school is that unit of change, that period in time when students can actually learn about what the different opportunities are for them, the different pathways, what's the right route for them. And very much that's what careers within schools is about. It's all about informing, building their knowledge, raising aspirations, helping them understand what could be next. But at the same time, we need to recognise that what the best step is, and we need to make sure schools are very aware of this, that what the best step is not necessarily the same for everyone. So that making sure that not everyone is just thinking, right, FE, then HE, that's the route I need to take. That obviously there are routes such as T-levels, apprenticeships, traineeships, etc., which young people should really be looking at and thinking about what their next best route is. So as well as really getting inspired by the business world and the opportunities that are out there from a labour market perspective, also understanding those different pathways as well. So the aim of a good career system, and certainly the Careers and Enterprise Company mission, is really about, as I said, preparing and inspiring those young people for the fast changing world of work. But what a great career system is really about is about using the support of business in that provision, and therefore having that a measurable impact on that young person whilst they're at school. We know though that, as Elena said, the last 18 months has been really, really tough for a lot of our young people, and this Careers and Enterprise Company through that period have actually made some additional funding available to support those young people's transitions. Over the last year, we have had some funding where we've been able to support year 11s actually in school in terms of careers advisance, so really preparing them to have those intended destinations and thinking about what they want to do next. And that's been some quite intensive support for some of the young people that the schools were most concerned were at the greatest risk of becoming NEET. However, that support's still needed, and the Careers and Enterprise Company have funded us to run another programme over the summer into next term, which is called Ahead of the Game, and we're working with the OCC on that, with Elaine and Luke and the team, with regards to actually supporting those year 11s who, as Elaine would put it, are feeling a little bit wobbly. They have those intended destinations which she's talked about, but are they actually going to make it until September in terms of actually fulfilling those? And if they do fulfill those and they do start, are they going to sustain that? So we're working with Advisor, who many of you may be aware of, to support them in terms of that careers guidance over the next couple of months and into that first term, into their next step as well. So we can make sure that, one, they fulfill that destination, but then if that doesn't feel quite right, if that's not the right place for them to be, that they can actually take that step to think about, right, what next? Not just, right, I'm leaving, that's it. I have that extra support around careers guidance to help them think about, well, if this isn't right, what could be right for them? And lots of different ways that we're going to do that. There's a few programs we're running, individual careers guidance, support around CVs, interviews, support around resilience, confidence. So lots of different programs that students can tap into, or young people can tap into, to make sure that they do really fulfill those destinations and go on to have a successful transition in the long term as well. If you can just flick on to the next slide very quickly. So this was just something I wanted to add as well. And when we're thinking about the breakout rooms, very much about how we really do support young people and what's important when we're looking at a school's careers provision. Very much top of that list, encounters with employers, really keen, really key. And I think that everyone would agree that what we experience absolutely influences our outcomes. So if young people can experience more encounters with employers whilst they're at school, different employers, as I said, with different pathways across different sectors, that absolutely will influence what they think about doing in their future, because it opens up so many more opportunities to them and makes them aware, and hopefully starts to break down some of those barriers or perceived barriers that some young people might feel are there as well. Really important that they get that rich information about the local job market, and actually how what they're learning in the curriculum really connects to that as well. So actually how the skills that they're developing and the knowledge they're developing in school, how that will really impact and support them when they go into the world of work. And then really key, and I know Elaine and the team will absolutely concur with this one as well, is that plan needs to be tailored to an individual's need. Young people are going through lots of different experiences, both, you know, through education, but at home and in terms of what they want to do next. And very much we need to ensure that schools are really looking at tailoring any careers plan to ensure that it really does have a positive outcome for all young people, that all young people are included in that plan as well. And, you know, there's a lot more, I think, as training providers as well, to ensure that it's, you know, it's not just one set, this is what happens, but we're really looking at the whole child and ensuring that they really do get what they need to have the greatest impact on their outcome. So that's just a little bit from me. It's great to work with the OCC team on this, and with Elaine and Luke. We're really thankful from the CEC's perspective as well that we've got the funding to be able to support this year.
Thanks, Nikki. So we're now going to go back to the questions that Elaine raised and go off into breakout rooms.
Thanks very much for going into the breakout rooms and for the discussions that happened in there. That was really useful, and I think it'd be really great now to get some feedback from the leads of those rooms and see if we can come up with something that perhaps we can work collaboratively on over the summer, but also to inform the EAT team's work. So Elaine, can I ask you to take the lead on that discussion?
Yeah, I'll lead from our group. So first of all, apologies, I completely failed as a facilitator, got stuck on question 1 for quite a long time, slightly moved on to question 2. So it'd be interesting what other rooms have, but also at the end of it, I can sort of give you an overview of some of the things that we're seeing training providers and colleges do over summer anyway, that I can sort of remind you. So one of the things we were talking about was really interesting is that communication between schools and colleges, and there seems to be maybe a bit of a gap around those young people that might have a learning need, so either coming in with an EHCP, but more importantly those young people who may have had a learning need but it wasn't we would call like a one, so not an EHCP, they may have had SEN support. In the old days, we used to have something called School Action and School Action Plus, but I'm really showing my age there talking about that. But when a young person had that support, then when they moved into their next stage in year 12, that information was provided, so you had an idea of what their need was. So there seems to be a lack, maybe possibly a gap around a lack of communication between schools and colleges or a training provider, just to make sure that that year 12 destination is aware of what that young person may need if they don't have an EHCP already. So I hope I've reflected that well for you, Eamon, but that came across quite strongly, and we see that ourselves. Sometimes you get young people that haven't got an EHCP, perhaps they should have had one, but they've had significant SEN support.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks. I think we also heard from a training provider there who is saying that they hear a lot about SEN figures, etc., but they're still not being approached themselves by schools or maybe even ourselves around opportunities, and they actually have vacancies willing to support, and maybe we need to look at promoting them a little bit more in those early stages, so when they're at school, etc., and just promoting that there are different options. It's not just school, it's not just a college, you can go and do other things. So there's obviously a little bit more promotion there around alternative provision. We did move on to Kickstart, which caused quite a discussion. Again, that's for 18 pluses. Sounds like it can be quite a complicated, heavy paperwork type of thing. A bit like we also heard from someone who's saying that just taking on an apprenticeship, again, there's quite a lot of paperwork to go through. So there are some challenges there around options for our young people. Unfortunately, what I didn't get onto is what we could be doing in over the summer, but I've got some suggestions that we can talk about. Rebecca, you have a question before I move on to the next room?
Sorry, Elaine, not a question, just a little correction. Kickstart is from 16 to 24, so they can do a Kickstart placement from the age of 16.
Yeah, the thing is with Kickstart, if you're 16, you've got to be on benefits, and not many young people are on universal credit. If they are, they're normally estranged from parents.
Yeah, absolutely. And we would, as a college, we would absolutely encourage anybody that came through us on the Kickstart scheme, if they were aged between 16 to 18 and not on a college course, that would be our first encouragement to get them back into that educational piece. But it's just they can from 16, that was all. Thanks, Elaine.
Thanks. Do we want to move on to the next room?
I can talk for, I think, was room 2.
Thanks.
So we also spent probably 90% of our time on the first question. So things that came up were, we covered things around support available to them, whether they have parents and families at home that can support them. Things about writing CVs or applying for college, doing college applications. If they're at home, and we know most year 11s haven't had to be in since the end of the May half term, it will be parents and people like that that are supporting or nagging, depending on how you want to term it. We looked at lack of employer exposure, again, because of the pandemic. So lack of work experience, apprenticeship talks, or even just exposure to external organisations. And we link this with it's sort of inspiration, knowing what options are out there for you. If you don't know you could do a job in X, why would you ever go and search it out? And then we also spoke about uncertainty. So finding it hard to plan when things are so uncertain, whether you suddenly have to self-isolate or your school closes. Yeah, just a lack of uncertainty, really. We then skipped on to the last question. So what information do you need from the EAT team? And I think we spoke mostly about sort of building contacts. So there'll be providers out there that have apprenticeships that are really suitable for neat young people, but we haven't quite made that connection between us and them. So sort of building that relationship between ourselves. And then also sort of a look at more physical visits rather than a reliance on online visits. So online doesn't work for all young people. So trying to get them physically into places is something that's quite key, I think. That was it for our group.
Thanks, Luke. I'll just do the last room. So we stayed in the main room. I think we actually answered all 3 of the questions. And in terms of the first one, there was concern around accessibility to funding, I think, for some of the providers who are not able to service 16 to 18-year-olds. But in terms of the young people themselves, there's that lack of knowledge that we're talking about in terms of how to find apprenticeships, and even if they know the right sites to go on, using the right terminology. So I think we talked about that lack of awareness and knowledge that they've had built over the last year whilst at school, in terms of that lack of careers guidance around that. And also talked about how, not necessarily much this year, but certainly last year, a lot of students missed out on their one-to-one guidance as well, which really didn't help support in them thinking about their in destination. In terms of what we can do, we talked about helping to signpost to opportunities, making it more visible. We talked about and one of the providers, Sophie, sorry, I can't remember which provider you're from, but creating sort of promotional videos, presentations about what they do, the courses they run, etc., that need to be engaging. And all providers may be creating something like that, which is then a base which schools can have to use for students to be able to understand about the different providers that we have across Oxfordshire. Also educating about what's the right opportunity, making sure students are getting that guidance, which really is about them, what's right for them, not what's right for the provider, for example, or right for the organisation. So they're actually being signposted in the best direction. And one of the things that we talked about in terms of information from, not so much information from the EAT team, but support from the EAT team, certainly in terms of communication with those young people, is we talked about a number of the providers in our room had apprenticeships at level 3 and level 4. But they said that actually that they will do functional skills for maths and English alongside those. So students do not need to come in with those qualifications, not necessarily. And that's something that they can get as part of that apprenticeship opportunity. So really, I suppose, helping the EAT team and also our careers advisors understand that there isn't a blocker there, that sometimes there are opportunities for young people to do those courses when they actually do start their apprenticeships as well. And also, again, really helping them understand their knowledge of who the different providers are, the different types of apprenticeships they run, and making sure our schools have got all of this information, which I don't know if they all necessarily have. They don't necessarily know which provider to reach out to. So pulling together that sort of information we can share readily with schools and with students, I think would be really valuable. Oh, and lots of creating digital content, engaging digital content for young people was seen as a really good thing to do.
Thanks for all the feedback, everyone. Elaine, I wonder if you might just wrap that up in as short a summary as possible. I'm aware that we are behind time, and then we'll discuss maybe the order of the agenda briefly after, so Sally and Fiona can squeeze in their bits as well. Thank you.
Fine. So I think I'm just going to pick up some key points that just kept emerging, which is around communication between schools and providers. That there seems to be a lack of knowledge or within schools. That's not fair. Schools aren't here to represent themselves about that wider opportunity. So we've heard that in all three groups, that actually some young people are not aware of their options. We also need to think about supporting that young person over the summer, and that, if I may very quickly just talk about the points that I wanted to, I was hoping would come up, and some really simple things that can happen over the summer, and that is maintain contact with your young person if you've made them an offer. Invite them in for a taster day, seriously, so they can have a look around and they're familiar. Bearing in mind their last familiarity was regular classroom days in year 10. Some of our providers have set up a very short video of how they are operating in a COVID environment. That doesn't just allay the fears of the young person, it allays the fears of a parent or family. And as I've mentioned before, we do have families who are quite concerned about where the young person is. Don't leave an offer to drift. If a young person is changing their mind, then, as we've also mentioned, signposting, helping them with other opportunities, referring back to our team. Feel free to contact our team if you've got someone in year 12 who you think is wobbling around their year 12 destination. That's the kind of thing that we can offer over the summer, and that's the sort of thing that we'd be looking for. We need to hear from you. If you've got someone who's going to drop out or at risk of dropping out, please let the EAT team know in September. Well, the other things we talked about is funding. Financial hardship has been huge. We had a young person last year whose parent was using their transport funding to feed the family. There's some massive financial issues out there, and sometimes a bus fare for a couple of days until they get their bursary through makes such a difference. So if anyone's got an issue around funding, please recognise that and maybe talk that through with them to see if there's any support that can be offered. I think that kind of about sums it up. I'm aware of the time, Sarah, so I don't want to go on too much, and I hope I've covered enough things.
Thank you, Elaine. That was a really interesting discussion and great to see so much involvement from the attendees today. So thank you all for your contributions, and let's hopefully we can hear from you again, Elaine, later in the year, and know that maybe more of those people made it to their destinations. So I think moving on to the next agenda item, if we can maybe just discuss quickly with Sally. Sally, would you mind if we put Fiona's agenda item and Matt ahead of yours, as I know that they've joined us just for this part of the meeting? I hope you don't mind. I can see Sally's thumb up. So Mel, if we could move the slide on through Sally's, and then we'll come back to you at the end. OK, so Fiona and Matt, I'm going to hand over to you now. Thank you very much. We're delighted to see you at the meeting today to tell us more about T-levels, and Matt to tell us more about your experience of delivering through the pilots. Thank you, Fiona.
Great, thank you. And I joined in the last discussion item, and it's really interesting. I have a child that's just left year 11, and it kind of feels like only such a tiny bit of contact time before she went in to start her GCSEs, that there are really big gaps about what the school has been able to do, and even what the school has been able to focus on understanding about their local context. So I think some great ideas there, and I kind of wish you every success in doing that. I'm here to talk about T T-levels, I'm conscious that some of you will already know some about T-levels, so if there are things that I go over that you already know, then just please forgive me, but I'm just going to rattle through and then you can see my slides afterwards if you want further information. I'm Director of Policy and Research at Learning and Work Institute. We're a research, development and policy organisation working across learning, skills and employment. And I'm going to give an intro to T-levels, including the work that we're doing, where we're working with an organisation called SDN to develop and deliver the employer support programme for T-levels. And so some of what I'm going to say is just a general overview of T-levels, and some of it is about kind of what employers are hearing and what they're saying, which hopefully will be able to help you think about your offer to them. First of all, I just want to start with a reflection on the current state of the labour market. We do quite a lot of labour market analysis, and the figures that come out monthly are starting to show really strong signs of recovery, with employment rising as the economy opens, and labour demand is rising. So online vacancies are now above pre-pandemic levels, hours worked are rising as people return from furlough, but there's still some significant impacts. And what we know is that young people have been hardest hit, partly because they're trying to get into the labour market, but also those sectors that young people tend to find themselves in first have been those that have been shut down. And so although young people account generally for about 12% of the labour force, it has been among this group where we've seen 60% of the fall in employment. And so things like T-levels, apprenticeships, the education offer are really, really important if we're not to kind of have a sort of, not to let them down at this key point and have the long-term scarring effects. But it's also harder because the opportunities that you might support young people into, apprenticeships, work experience placements, they are also harder to get as businesses are really trying to focus on kind of getting back up and running and making sure that they survive. So there's a real opportunity for T-levels. It's a route to employment. People want provision that helps them get a job, but also I think it's going to be a growing challenge to secure that employer engagement while employers are, otherwise engaged. So we can just go on to the next slide, please. I want to start first of all with how T-levels fit into the wider education and training options post GCSE, how they sit alongside A-levels and how they sit alongside apprenticeships, because there are a set of options for young people. And actually, as we reflected in the previous discussion, young people have perhaps had less support, had less information, had less careers guidance to help them through this. And we do need to make sure that young people have the right option for them, and T-levels is one of them, but it is just one of them. So kind of a quick overview of what the T-level is. So it's a 2-year course for 16 to 19-year-olds. They've been jointly designed by employers and education. The idea is that they'll teach the skills, knowledge and experience needed in a job in a particular sector. And so it has this industry placement, and it's not a kind of 2-week work experience. It's this kind of 45-day placement where they get some real experience of the world of work and can develop practical and technical skills needed for the job. They're being designed to be as demanding as A-levels and apprenticeships, but of course, as being something that is new, there is that kind of recognition and credibility gap that something new on the market always has. And there are some real questions among parents about, should I be supporting my young person onto this option? And, there's lots of work around parental engagement as much as young people's engagement, to help them see this as something that will be good for their young person. On the next slide, this is a slide that we use with employers. Of course, as providers, you will need to know lots of detail about T-levels and how it works and how they're funded and what they include. Employers tell us generally across our work that they really struggle to navigate the complexity of the skills system. You know how complex it is. Their job is not to understand the skills system, it's to engage in it, and that's really hard. And so what they say is they're looking to you as providers to help them understand how they can get involved. And they say what they don't want is someone trying to sell them a product, but they want someone who understands their business, can get to know their business, think about what their business needs and what the most appropriate offer in helping them do that might be. And this slide, I guess, just captures the information that we start talking to employers about. The pitch for employers around T-levels is that enables them to have that first contact with the workplace of the workforce of the future, to get to shape them, to get to know them, to get some business benefit by having young people work on particular projects, and that this would give them access to really bright talent that they can shape and then bring into their business. And it's often about kind of recruitment pipeline and bringing in extra resource. I think we have to recognise that there's kind of extra support needed when you're having a young person on placement, but hopefully the longer term placement does mean that they can add value too. If you just go on to the next slide and have a quick look at what makes up a T-level. So it's a 2-year programme with a core element where students learn the knowledge, the concepts, the principles about a route, and it's assessed through an examiner project. Then there's an occupational specialism where students choose, and they need to learn about that specialism and being assessed on the knowledge and skills to do a specific job. And that's at least half the total qualification. And then there's this industry placement where they will develop technical skills and knowledge, not just demonstrate them, but develop them, that they'll develop those practical skills about being in employment, and that they will make some meaningful contribution in the workplace. It's not just a bit of work experience, knowing what it's like to be in the workplace, but they'll make a contribution to it. Students need their level 2 in English and Maths both to pass their T-level, and that's part of the overall programme. On the next slide, just to say, T-levels are being rolled out over a number of years. We've already started with sorry, I've just looked at my slides. They've already started in autumn 2020, and they're continuing to develop. This slide says there's 24 of them. There are now 23 of them. Over the last week or so, the human resources T-level has been pulled because government's not been able to find an awarding organisation to contract for development. And those ones that are in the future are still being developed, so it's worth keeping an eye out. I think the other thing to recognise is that employers don't have to offer placements in their core business. So their business might be manufacturing, but they might have IT placements or finance placements. And I think sometimes the support that we can have with employers can kind of help them think about where placements could be, which is outside of that main sector, and think about where young people could add value. The next slide just talks a little bit about what an industry placement is and how it's different to, but can work alongside apprenticeships and work experience. So it's a real environment. At the minute, you cannot do remote placements, which is a challenge in the current working environment, and is an ongoing challenge given that some people will do substantial parts of their role remotely, and therefore that is the real working environment. So there's some decisions there for the department to make. They're approximately 45 working days long, but actually in a range of different models. They're occupationally specific. It's about developing those practical and technical skills in the T-level that the student is taking. So they are different to apprenticeships. The balance of in-work and out-work is different, and they are different to work experience. This is a kind of much more substantial programme. On the next slide, just to say, although we talk about 45 days, there are a range of models that this could look like, and it's to suit business needs. It could be day release, it could be a block, it could be mixed, and the model will work depending on how the business works. So here's just some questions that and some considerations to think about where the model might work. And as you as providers, you have to obviously think about what works for you as well. But as you're engaging with employers, there are some questions to think about. So where are there peaks and troughs in the work cycle for that employer? Is there a particular time of year that works best? When can they best provide work and supervision? And that's really important. So it's a supervised supported placement. when and where are the particular projects. And so there is quite a lot of flexibility there. And so the fact that some people might say, well, I can't do day release, or I don't have a block of time, there's a lot of flexibility that I think you can offer to employers there. On the next slide, why offer an industry placement? These are some of the things that when we talk to employers, this is what employers say themselves. This is not our kind of pitching out to them about why they should do something. The things that employers say is that working with students in their local area can improve their local profile and be seen as them as a business supporting the next generation, which is kind of positive reputational impact. They see it as kind of opening up to opportunities to students locally. It increases their exposure to the type of work that you as a business do, so that other people will come to you about it. And given the changes in work that we've seen over the last few decades and expect to see, actually, it's really true.
You're on mute, Fiona.
I don't know when I went on mute. Was it quite recent? Was that quite recent?
Yes.
Yeah,
It's happened, Fiona. Don't worry. It was
that's all right then. Great. So hopefully you didn't miss too much. It's also really important opportunity for employers to kind of see firsthand what the talent pipeline is. Who could fit into their culture? What sort of skills would they bring? So there's really strong benefits for why employers would get involved, and other employers recognise that. And on the resources that we have developed for industry placements, in each of the routes that we have, there are case studies, films and written, of employers in those sectors saying, this is what I get out of it. These are the questions I had. These are the challenges, but this is why I do it. And of course, we do know that employers really value the voice of other employers in kind of finding out how they should get engaged. What employers say is, don't mention that this is about saving on recruitment bills, and don't mention that this is about kind of free or cheap resource. That is not what this programme is about. It is about talent pipeline, it is about profile, it is about skills for young people, but it's not that kind of cheap labour. We do need to move away from that. On the next slide, there's just some questions about what employers ask about industry placements. So they want to know, well, who has to look after them? Won't it take much time? What about the paperwork? What will the quality of students be? And again, on the employer toolkit, there's a whole set of answers to those, or suggested answers about what can be done. Nonetheless, whenever we talk to employers, they are really looking for providers to help them with this. So there is a centralised support service, but they want to build that relationship, and they want you as providers to be able to walk them through it, to help them find the right people, to help them set it up, to help them with the paperwork. And that's what they feel will be some of the barriers removed for them engaging. I just want to finish by giving you a quick overview of the programme. On the next slide, you can see a whole set of logos and an employer journey. What we've tried to do in the support programme is pick up employers at different parts of the process, maybe when they've just heard about it, maybe when they're thinking about engaging, maybe when they're trying to set up a placement. And so the support programme is staged around these different steps of the journey. And we've done so much consultation and work with both FE sector groups and employer groups, and you can see their massive logos on the left, to try and make sure that for each sector and for each stage of the journey, there's really practical advice, practical resources and practical support. On my final slide, you can see the link to the support programme. What we try to offer is to give employers support with understanding T-levels and deciding whether to offer industry placements, support in actually planning those placements so it fits the needs of both the young person and the business, and then the ongoing support in delivering industry placements. there's a whole set of tools, resources, case studies that you can dip in and out of. And as well as flagging these things up to employers you're working with, please do take a look at them yourself, because I think they're really useful tools that you could use in that employer engagement. As well as the kind of resources on the website, there's a whole suite of workshops and webinars that run throughout the programme to enable employers to kind of come in and engage themselves. And there is also some kind of consultancy hands-on support that's available free in order to provide specific support to employers at kind of central point to help them do that. Hopefully that will add real value to the work that you do, but it certainly doesn't replace it, because as I say, employers are really looking to develop that relationship with their provider and then get some ongoing support and guidance through that relationship with you. I'll stop there. I'm conscious that there were lots of questions and comments picking up, so I don't know if we want to go on to the next presentation and then come back to those.
Thank you, Fiona. That was really interesting. And online today, we definitely have a couple of providers who are starting to deliver T-levels next year. And then the following year, another provider will also be starting their rollout. So really useful for those providers, but also hopefully for the providers who are online who aren't going to be delivering T-levels, just to provide that sort of overview, really, as you've done. So thank you. Yes, there are lots of questions. I think we'll hear from Matt briefly first, and then maybe we can put together the questions for both of you, and Mel can pass those on to you after Matt's presentation. So Matt, over to you. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Sarah. Hello everybody, my name's Matt Reynolds and I'm one of the vice principals at Cirencester College, and I'm aware we're pushed on time, so I'm going to give you a summary, really, a brief overview of how we've approached working with T-levels here at Cirencester. So firstly, to give you some context, we are a college in the Cotswolds, obviously, in Cirencester. We have approximately 2,500 learners in the 16 to 19 age group. If you were to imagine our catchment area, we effectively have a very, if you throw a ring around Cirencester, we have a very big loop around the town. Although we're quite a small town, our catchment covers as far north as Moreton in the Marsh, as far south as over the other side of the M4 near Chippenham. For the west, we go as far as the Forest of Dean, places such as Cinderford. And then for Oxfordshire wise, we have bus routes that come in via Woodstock and Witney and Carterton. So we have students cover a large area. It's probably about a 60-mile loop around Cirencester, which is our catchment for the college. We pull lots of students across the region into us. Now, for T-levels, we are one of 50 colleges in the whole country who've been piloting T-levels in this first year. We are the main college piloting T-levels in the Southwest region. And it's been a fascinating experience. I think one of the key differences is that T-levels are not only about what do you know, they are about competencies too. They are about it's okay if you know stuff, but what can you do? And what's happened effectively is the content list for the T-levels has been drawn up by employers. So traditionally, if you imagine a student finishes a vocational qualification, they come into the workplace, and then an employer would have an 8 or 10 week induction program of their own to get students up to speed, or new employees up to speed, ready to sort of put them on the line. Well, what's happened this time is that the government has effectively gone to employers and asked them to draw up the content list. Tell us your sort of menu of everything you would love a brand new employee to know when they arrive at your door. They've then given that content list to the educators and said to us, OK, this is what they want, so how are you going to teach it? And we've had this ongoing programme of development for T-level. We've been working as a college, Cirencester College have been working with the government for the last 2 years in developing T-level. And we've had this fantastic collaboration, if you like, in designing a cutting edge qualification, which is going to be of a European standard, effectively. We're going to be able to compete with countries that are fantastic at vocational education, such as Norway and Germany and so on. The T-level really is a gold standard technical qualification for the modern age. So one of the benefits as well is that's not where the relationship ends. The T-level is a genuine collaboration with employers to enable us to run it effectively. We work more closely with employers on T-level than we probably have on any other qualification, bar apprenticeships. Essentially, employers often with traditional vocational qualifications such as BTECs and the like would get a call from a college when the college is looking for a work placement. That's not really how the T-level works. The relationship runs much deeper than that. What we try and do is build a really effective relationship with employers so you can be part of the programme of what we teach. It can range in a number of ways. Typically, there may be case studies that the students learn around. So instead of going through the old vocational style of learning content and ticking off criteria boxes, it's based around scenarios, real world cases and case studies of particular projects, where a student will study a particular example and then attached to that example will be a number of different attributes across the qualification. So if you imagine, say, construction, in an old BTEC, you would have had a health and safety unit. You would have had a logistics unit, you would have had a project management unit, but it doesn't work like collecting these like sort of tickets and banking them. In a T-level, you'd be given a scenario of a particular construction site, something really innovative, cutting edge, and then working and learning all about that case study would then encompass elements of health and safety and planning and project management. These are all in context in the real world. So one of the ways we work with employers is employers helping us build these case studies or use real world scenarios that they've come across themselves. We also share plans, teaching plans, schemes of work. We've approached employers saying, you know, we're planning on teaching X. You've got experience in this. What would you think students should really experience when they're learning about it? We've had employers involved in our planning, our teaching. Employers also come in to do guest lecturing. They've worked remotely via Teams. They've helped with judging competitions and student work and so on and so forth. What it does do is it gives the employer the early eyes on to the talent pipeline, as Fiona was saying, which is quite a critical element, I think, for many employers. But also it means that the relationship is that much more meaningful. The final point really I'd say about how closely the whole T-level system works with employers is we've built these employer panels too. So we've collected together the groups of employers across different industry sectors. Currently we have T-levels in childcare and digital and construction. Next year we have whole new streams coming on, 3 new health-based T-level streams and 2 new ones on digital. And we've built these employer panels around these themes. So the employer can be directly engaged with the college in deciding how we teach and helping us construct and design these courses. And it's just been really valuable, I think, for all of us as different parties, stakeholders involved in this T-level initiative to build a really effective experience for the learners, but something that's meaningful and valuable for the employer at the other end. So I'm just I've posted our college contact details in the comments section there. So if any employers here would like to be involved in an employer panel, then please do come and check out our T-level section on our website. Or if you'd like to find out more about T-levels here at Cirencester College, then do have a look at our site and get involved. Thank you.
Thank you very much to both our presenters, Fiona and Matt. There were some questions raised in the chat. Mal, are you happy to deliver those?
Sorry, Sarah, I can't see them at the moment because I'm sharing my screen. I don't know whether you could read them out or if you want to, as you suggested, maybe collate them and come back to people if we're running out of time.
Yeah, we are a bit short on time. Let's ask the first couple and then we'll move on if that's okay with Fiona and Matt. And Sally, you're still okay to stay on for a short time to do your presentation? No? Okay, Sally's shaking her head. So we'll do the quick questions and answers and then we'll include Sally's presentation in the next meeting, if that's okay, Sally. Thank you. Okay, so Chris Newton, do employers need to DBS all staff where a student is attending work experience for their 45 days, as it is not directly training for work like an apprenticeship? Just thought it may put some employers off if this is the case. Fiona?
Yeah, so I've just shared a link in the chat about where the guidance is around DBS. So there's not a legal requirement, but it is at your discretion. It would be about the line manager and supervisor, and it would be about certain circumstances of that particular placement. So it shouldn't be a barrier, and it's certainly not kind of the whole staff base, but have a look at the resource.
Thank you. And Chris Newton, do you want to raise your question, I think, around what counts towards an apprenticeship?
Yeah, that was on the APL, was it?
I think so, yes.
Yeah, no, I was just interested if they're doing a T-level and in the same apprenticeship that they're then going to go on to. Does the T-level count towards accreditation of prior learning, and therefore could we make the apprenticeship shorter?
Shall I have a go at that one as well? So there's not, unhelpfully, there's not kind of a formal set out piece. You've got this T-level and it counts to this much as of an apprenticeship, and that does feel like a bit of a gap, I think, in my personal opinion, that there isn't that kind of clear link. Of course, when you do an apprenticeship, so you imagine you're the apprenticeship provider, there is provision for you to recognise prior learning, but as you do that, it still has to fit within the remit of still being kind of a year long and all those sorts of requirements. So you can look at it as part of the recognition of prior learning provisions within apprenticeships, but there's not a formal process at the minute from T-levels to apprenticeships. I don't know whether colleagues have got experience. Don't know whether, Matt, you've done anything on that.
Thanks, Fiona. No, I think essentially the T-level model, the kind of the main construct of the model is that students complete their T-level and then go into the workplace. But the T-levels are a level 3 qualification, so effectively the equivalent of doing 3 A levels plus the work experience that's tied to it too. They also do come with UCAS points. So if a student completes a T level and does not want to go straight into the workplace, they still have the opportunity to use a T level to access university. And as a level 3, I guess it wouldn't be an unreasonable progression to complete the T level and then go on to do a level 4 apprenticeship in the workplace.
Great, thank you. Hopefully that answers, I think, the questions that I could see in the chat. If there are any more, as Mel said, we'll email or contact, put some information between maybe Fiona, Matt and ourselves and the person who raised the question following the meeting.
Sarah, there is one more question in there from Sally.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, Sally.
William.
Sally, do you want to raise it, as I can't see it in the chat at the moment?
Yeah, so sorry all, I do have to duck out in a minute because I'm chairing another meeting, but I just wanted to thank Fiona for that information about T-levels, and I'm just interested in regards to organising the logistics around the work placement element. Is that down to the training provider or college to actually find those placements, because that sounds like a huge amount of work.
Yeah, so you can't complete, so it's not work experience where it's an optional extra, it's an integral part of the T-level, and therefore without the work placement you don't get a T-level. So it is an integral part of what needs to happen, and employers say that actually they've got quite a bit of interest in taking part, but they do need support from providers, particularly because you need to think about how it's a meaningful placement that supports skills development, you will need to have that kind of relationship with them on that. So it's thinking about your wider relationships with employers and talking to them about how they could and if they could offer T-level placements on that. Yes, but there will be challenges there, but there was also quite a lot of positive engagement from employers saying actually the larger time allocation, which means there could be real value for them as well, means that different employers would perhaps be more likely to be involved.
Great, thank you. So thanks very much to Fiona and Matt for joining us for that. We're going to leave the next agenda item then, as Sally has another meeting to chair. So thank you very much for your time today, everybody. The next agenda item was around agenda items for the next meeting. So please do pop those in the chat or send an email through to Mel or myself. We'd be really grateful if you could please complete our survey, which Mel has popped in the chat. Apologies for the overrun this morning, but I think a really useful meeting for everybody. We will, of course, come back to the things that Sally was going to cover from the working group, or maybe email or send some of those things out to you in the meantime. So we look forward to the next meeting, and thanks very much for joining us today.